All right, hi everybody, and thank you so much for having me. So first of all, my name is Mikhail Gofman. I'm from the computer science department, and this presentation titled Biometrics and the Future of Authentication is part of the center's Firewallside Chat Talk series. This particular event is done in very kind collaboration with Division of Information Technology, who has invited me, who has provided the food, most importantly, right? Right? So I'd like to thank them for having us here. Before I begin, I would like to apologize in advance. My colleague, Dr. Sanjini Mitra from ISDS, who was supposed to be joining me, she had a last-minute emergency, so she couldn't come. But she played a very important role in putting this presentation together and making sure it is what I want it to be. So what I'd like to do today is, first, I'd like to talk about what exactly is biometrics and why is it such a big deal. After that, I would like to talk about some really useful, some really interesting, and some just plainly cool applications of biometrics. After that, I'll talk about the challenges of biometrics, and I'll give a brief glimpse into the future. So just to begin, so what exactly are biometrics? By now, with Apple Touch ID, the fingerprint reader, anybody owns that device? Anybody has a device with a fingerprint reader? Most people do, right? Yeah. So by now, probably most of you know what biometrics are. In fact, thanks to Apple and Samsung, when somebody says biometrics, people automatically think the fingerprint reader. That's Windows Phone. I don't actually have a fingerprint reader, but you get the idea. So in the research circles, when we say biometrics, we typically talk about the measurable physical and behavioral characteristics of humans, which could be, for example, face. That's a classic one. Voice. The retinal images, the imagery retina, the fingerprints, I just mentioned that, the palm print, and even brain waves. So yes, brain waves are becoming a form of biometric. And yes, we're literally referring to reading people's minds. In fact, the scientists in Japan, they have studied the brainwave biometrics, and they were able to almost reconstruct person's dreams. We are talking about reading your mind, quite literally. Last year, when I was at a conference back in San Jose, they had a keynote speaker from Berkeley, and he talked about using brainwave recognition as means of authentication. So what actually does this mean? Well, the way he explained it is like this. You basically gain access to your computer by mentally singing your favorite song. So that's just one of the cool applications of biometrics nowadays. Another one is signature, by the way you sign. So signature is actually a very classical kind of biometric. In fact, for years, like way before computers, people would use signatures in order to verify documents. The area of biometrics is not new at all. It has been around for years. Recognizing human patterns is something that is very innate to humans. For example, let's take face recognition. So it is a known fact that babies are able to recognize and distinguish their mother's face from between 2 hours after birth to 2 days after birth. Same thing goes for mother's voice. So it's something that is, this ability is very innate to humans. But when we talk about computers, that's a whole different story. With computers, it's much more difficult. So first of all, why are we using biometrics? Well, because the previous authentication measures which we tried to do were not very successful. So one of the reasons is convenience. So what are you used to doing every time you want to use, well, pretty much any kind of service? What do? You enter a password, right? What are two things you know about it? That's annoying, right? And you forget it all the time, right? Well, that's why people love biometrics. But before we talk about how great biometrics are, let's talk about how bad passwords are. So yes, you all have that experience. So what is the problem with passwords? Well, number one, people have to design a strong password, and people have to remember a strong password. This is something we're not great at. So this has resulted in a phenomenon called password fatigue. That's the jargon term IT people use. The term refers to the fact that we have to remember so many passwords that we start using the same password everywhere. Anybody here is guilty of that? Yeah. Yeah. So password fatigue is a big deal. And this results in something called a domino effect. So let's say you access some news site, and you use the same password for that as you use for your online banking. Which one is the hopefully more secure system? The online banking, right? So the less secure system would be the news website, right? So if somebody compromises your news website account, what happens? The next thing they would go for is your banking account, right? So that's another problem with passwords. So what about biometrics? Well, with biometrics, you don't have to design anything. You don't have to remember anything. Nobody has ever forgotten how their face looks or fingerprints. But even if you did, that's okay, right? That's okay. As long as you don't, lose your hand or, lose your face, that does happen occasionally in some unfortunate incidents, you should be fine with biometrics, right? Your physical traits generally are pretty stable, with some exceptions that I mentioned. Another one is security. So what else did we use to identify people besides passwords? Well, identification cards, right? Passports, other kinds of legal documents. And one thing we learned about that is that they're very easily forgeable. That's why on credit cards we see more and more sophisticated chip technologies, because they make credit cards much more difficult to duplicate. So biometrics, on the other hand, is very difficult, although not impossible, to duplicate. So that's the nice thing about biometrics. And we'll see. That's why biometrics is becoming so popular in applications such as Homeland security, because one thing we learned is no matter how sophisticated we make legal documents, people learn to fake them. Okay? So, all right. So, why are biometrics such a big deal? Let's take a look at some very interesting things that happened recently and some things that I call them psychics, but they're really market projectors, that they expect to happen to biometrics in the recent decades, in the future decades to come. So first of all, since 2013, which wasn't so long ago, well, it seems like it, more than 200 different biometrically enabled smartphone models were released. You probably heard of at least one, right? Well, maybe two, iPhone and Samsung, right? So, but there were 200 different other models, okay? Anybody heard of the Internet of Things? What does that refer to? A lot of different kinds of devices, and we're talking, phones, computers, but we're going far beyond that. We're talking about pretty much smart shower heads, smart dog collars. Basically, take your favorite object, add a chip to it with a radio, so it's connected to the internet, and you got an IoT device. This is becoming a bigger and bigger deal. So by 2020, we're expecting, by 2018, excuse me, we're expecting that there will be more than 500 million biometrically enabled IoT devices on the Internet of Things. Another interesting trend is by 2020, we expect that 65% of all e-commerce transactions that are done through mobile phones will be secured by biometrics. So the most interesting question is, what kind of biometric will it be? For now, it seems like it's going to be the fingerprint. But one thing we learned about future is that it's difficult to predict. Okay? Yet another interesting trend is by 2019, this one can be controversial, but 127 countries are expected to implement national ID programs. Most of them will probably heavily rely on biometrics, because when we relied on other things, we didn't have such a great experience. Now, so what about the money? Well, so by 2020, we're expecting that a fingerprint market will reach 11.9 billion. The overall global biometric market will be worth by more than 30 billion. Now, as I was putting this together, this is a more conservative projection. Some people project 36 billion, some people project 40 billion. Some people have even more optimistic outlook. So I guess it's nice to be the person who tries to guess the future, all right? But the point is, the biometric market is a force to be reckoned with. Now, what if you're a student or an investor? Well, perhaps this is the area you may want to consider. Biometrics is only going to get bigger. So the next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about some interesting applications of biometrics today in the various fields. So the first kind of applications, which is probably the most popular kind, well, at least the most popular kind in people's minds, is the applications in Homeland security. So who here is, well, maybe I shouldn't ask that, but if you're a non-US citizen, you have probably faced this when you entered US. Is that true? Can I pick on you, Dave? Sure. Dr. Faulkner said that this program was trying to prevent his daughter from getting back into the country. So, okay, anybody here had to use that system before? Yeah? I had to use it, but not in US. Yeah. So what exactly is the US visit program? So US visit program now officially is called OBIM, but a lot of people still think of it as US visit, and they call it that. So a US visit program basically does the following. If you're a non-US citizen who is entering the country, you have to provide 10 fingerprint images. Before 2009, it was just 2 fingerprint images, but now it's 10 fingerprint images and a picture of your face. All of the data gets matched against a database of known criminals, terrorists, and other kinds of individuals. And those databases are shared amongst different countries. It's shared with the EU countries. It's shared with, I believe, Australia. So if you're on the run from one country to another for some crime, as we'll see in the few real-world examples, they can still catch you. So let's take a look at some of the very interesting incidences that actually happened. Those are the ones which were published as part of the US visits promotion. So here is one incident. The United Kingdom and the United States are currently working together to prevent criminals and immigration violators from entering their countries. When a man applied for asylum in the United States, UK immigration officials requested that the United States check the man's fingerprints against the Department of Homeland Security's US visit data. The results revealed that the man has previously traveled to US using a different name. The new information confirmed that the asylum applicant was lying about his identity. Upon further investigation, the United Kingdom learned that the man wanted on rape charges in Australia and was returned there to face court proceedings. So now, the guy who was trying to get into UK was found guilty by US for a crime in Australia. Yeah. So, and all of this is thanks to the biometrics database and sharing of data. Here is another interesting incident. And you know how I said that legal documents are very easy to fake? So this is that example. So this is the second incident which US Visit has talked about. When a man applied for asylum at a US Asylum Office, his fingerprints were checked against US Visit's database. Although he had used 3 aliases and different birth date to try to evade detection, his biometrics revealed an extensive criminal record, including charges of rape, assault, and outstanding warrant for kidnapping. As a result, US Visit's positive identification of the person, he was basically denied asylum. And probably a few other things happened to him. Right? So this program is very robust. The Department of Homeland Security is very proud of it. A lot of technologies that they use are developed by the Accenture company, and they have released a very extensive white paper on that. So Homeland Security is a big, big application of biometrics, and US Visit is just one such example. Okay? Which one of you has one of those? A passport. Oh, wow. The rest of you don't travel? Oh. So something happened to your passport since 2006, if you got your passport after 2006. It's now a law that your passport has a chip on it. It's called a biometric passport. How do you know if your passport is a biometric passport? Well, it's simple. You see the symbol right there? This little circle sandwiched in between 2 rectangles? That's a symbol of a biometric passport. And it's standard across all over the world. So if you find a passport and it has that, it means it's a biometric passport. So what exactly is a biometric passport? Well, a biometric passport contains a chip, a secure chip, and that chip contains the same information as you would find on the front cover of your passport. And in addition to that, it also would contain your biometric data. So in some countries, this is your face photo. In some countries, it's fingerprints. In some countries, it's your retinal scans. So this makes passport much more difficult to forge. Okay? And now, one of the controversies is, so can this chip be hacked? Well, to tell you frankly, pretty much anything can be hacked given enough time and resources. But so far, biometric passports had pretty good success rates, although there were some troublesome incidents that have made some people worried. All right? But it does make the passport much more difficult to duplicate. All right? So The US is not the only country out there who is using biometrics in their homeland security programs. So right now, around 28% of airports around the world, they use biometrics as part of their security. This includes pretty much all countries in the EU. This includes Australia. This includes Canada. So biometrics is becoming very, very widespread. Some countries use multimodal biometric systems. The Arab Emirates, they're using a multimodal system, which I believe is based on fingerprints and face. Recently, there was a news article on that in biometricsupdate.com. All right? I don't exactly remember what sorts of biometrics they used, but they use multiple biometrics. So the idea is when you use multiple biometrics, it helps make identification process more secure. Because instead of bypassing one thing, you bypass another thing. And the reason I bring up multimodal is because, well, I want to pitch something in later on. So now, let's talk about applications of biometrics in mobile security. Who has pioneered mobile fingerprint reading? Everybody said Apple is #1. Apple was the first. There was nobody here from Apple, right? Okay. Now, it's true that iPhone 5S's fingerprint reader was awesome, but they were not exactly the first. So I list just a few. So Siemens in 1998, they had the first fingerprint reading device. Well, the first mobile phone which featured a fingerprint reader. Now, I used to think that the first mobile device with a fingerprint reader was Motorola Atrix 4G. You may have even owned that device. It didn't go obsolete that long ago. In fact, I still have it. So I thought that was the first device until I started working on our book. And I was like, oh, holy cow, people were doing this since '98. They were doing that since before I was in high school. So, yeah. So there is another one, Sagem 2000. So the company is Sagem, and they made a phone called Sagem MC959. And the list goes on and on and on. Now, in our book, we list the whole comprehensive list, but there are at least 15 different devices that came before iPhone. I'm sorry. So Apple was not the first. But all of those devices had one thing in common. Anybody went crazy about those devices? No. Oh, okay. Well, we have a few people, right? But iPhone was the one that made this stuff popular, right? So why exactly did that happen? Why did all the previous attempts fail while iPhone was so successful? Well, there are a few reasons. A lot of those devices you see right here, they're not what we call smartphones. 1998 was not exactly famous for being the era of smartphones, right? In fact, a phone back then was a phone. It was a phone, right? You would use it to make calls, right? Mine had a game of Snake on it, and I was really impressed by that, which you could play on your nice monochrome display. It made noises, too, whenever you crash into the wall. But those were not exactly smart devices. Those were not exactly smart devices. They didn't really contain any sensitive data, per se. I mean, they had your phone numbers, but that was about it, right? They were not smart devices like nowadays. Nowadays, your phone has much more than phone numbers on it, right? In fact, it may have your entire livelihood on it. So those were not smart devices, so really protecting them with a fingerprint was probably an overkill. At least that's what many people felt. Also, another thing is the design was not that great. It was not user-friendly, so it was just another impediment to using your device. Okay? Also, another reason is that the function of that fingerprint reader was to merely allow you to unlock your device. I mean, that was the end of it. Now, Apple, they found many other novel applications of fingerprint reading. Anybody here use Apple Pay? Yeah. It relies on the fingerprint reader. Of course, none of those devices could do that. And many more biometric applications for mobile devices are coming along, which use biometrics for much more than simply securing your device. Okay? So, but how else do people protect mobile devices with biometrics? A lot of us think fingerprint, the end. Well, have you heard of this device which recently came out in 2015 in Japan? Anybody heard of Arrows and X FO4G? Yeah. Well, it has came out in 2015 in Japan, and this one, instead of using fingerprints, it uses a retinal scan. It has a built-in retinal scanner which scans your retina. I got some friends in Japan, and I'm trying to get this one for our research. Okay? Yeah. So here is another one. This one was released by in 2014 by Descartes Biometrics. This is a phone which you can unlock by just holding it up to your ear. So the phone reads your ear patterns and unlocks. Now, unofficial, we here at CSUF have also worked on implementing this on an Android device. Our prototype is almost complete. But that's not actually our goal. We're actually trying to do something else, and this is just part of that. So I can't really talk about it until we publish it. Okay? So ear is another thing. Another one is multimodal biometrics. So why just stop at a fingerprint or a retinal scan? Why not use multiple biometrics? If multiple biometrics can be successful in Homeland security applications, why not in mobile applications? Nobody has practically done that. There are only a few publications out there on the subject. So what we here at CSUF, our biometrics research team, has done, we have developed novel algorithms for combining data from person's face and from person's voice on a device. And as a result, we were able to get much, much better performance. If you're interested in our article, you can check it out on the communications of ACM. All right? Oh, well, they're cheering for us. Thank you. Yeah. 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 I mean, we're passionate about this stuff, but wow. Right? So our main contribution is not so much the fact that we're using multiple biometrics in the same device, but it's the way in which we combine the data. But overall, the science of using multiple biometrics on a mobile phone is fairly new. There are only a few other publications except ours. And so we'd like to think that we're making important contributions here. Okay? So, and now, so why don't you see too many mobile devices with multimodal biometrics on them? Well, the reason being is user-friendliness. People like their devices to be convenient before they like them to be secure. I mean, yes, all was denied, but I think our behavior shows otherwise. So providing multiple biometrics, so in which in our case are face and voice, it can be too cumbersome. First, you got to take a picture, then you got to record your voice. That's too much work for an average user. So, right? So user-friendliness is a major obstacle. So here is one approach which we try to use. So instead of having the person, capture a picture and record his voice, we have him record a short video of his face while speaking a word. Then we can get the voice and face in one shot. We have other innovative applications as well. So in the future, we're planning to add fingerprints to our scheme. So you press the button to start the video recording, and when you press the button, we get your fingerprint. So really, we're trying to make multimodal biometrics no harder than unimodal. This is the key to making multimodal biometrics acceptable on mobile devices. All right? So, OK, self-promotion over. All right? Yeah. So another interesting application of biometrics nowadays is healthcare. So one of the fears that people have when they go to a hospital, well, besides what they're going to do to you, is what if they do the wrong thing to you? What if they do the wrong thing to you? I mean, I think, comedy shows are full of cases of where they mix up the plastic surgery cases. So you get, a nose extension, which you didn't ask for, right? I saw quite a few movies like that. So how can you know that the person on which you're about to operate is actually the right person? Well, in healthcare, people are using an ECG-based biometric. So what is ECG? It stands for electrocardiogram. In other words, your heart rhythms. So people have fairly unique heart rhythms. So before we slice you up with a knife, we may want to check your electrocardiogram patterns to make sure that we're actually operating upon the right person. So this is becoming more and more widely used, and it helps to reduce the number of medical mistakes. Same thing goes before they give you medication. Maybe they should check, are we giving the right medication to the right person? Because, I mean, let's face it, doctors and nurses, as great as they are, they're humans, right? They make mistakes. So healthcare is another huge, huge area of biometrics, and as projections show, it'll become bigger and bigger. All right? So we talked about Apple Pay. Apple Pay is an example of a payment authorization system. So payment authorization is becoming obsessed with biometrics as well. For example, in Japan, there is a company that wants to get rid of credit cards completely. So how do you authorize payments? Well, I get what I want, and then I put my hand against the scanner. If it matches, it'll charge my account. So this company hopes to get rid of credit cards completely. So we all heard of Apple Pay and Samsung Pay, right? I'm not going to spend too much time on that because you all know how it works, right? You find what you want, you scan your fingerprint, and you get charged, right? There is another company called Swipe. Anybody heard of them? So they have pioneered a credit card with a fingerprint reader on it. So no more PIN codes, no more nothing. Basically, when you swipe your card, you put your thumb on a fingerprint reader on the card, and you swipe it. If your fingerprint matches, you get charged. Now, I have a little video here. We have tested the sound. So let's see if it's successful.
Fingerprint identification is about to be everywhere. You've seen it in the movies, on smartphones and tablets. And now, also on your payment card. Let me show you. Let's say I'd like some water. Quick, isn't it? And it's highly secure. And let me show you why. This is my payment card, and this is my PIN code. I place it here, and I swipe. That's it. And if there's only a chip terminal, that's no problem either. And there's no transaction limits.
I know that's a good thing.
Forget your passwords.
All right. So basically, this may be. Wait, what happens? There we go. So perhaps this may be the future of credit cards, if credit cards have a future. Yeah. So makes it interesting. Who's going to win, right? So right now, this technology is being used in Norway. I didn't hear of it being used anywhere else, but it may well be the case that it may soon come to where we are. Let's talk about biometrics and social networking. Anybody here heard of Biometric Match? Probably not. So they're a experimental startup company, you can say. So, okay, I'm not going to ask this question, but people use online dating, right? Or they try to find friends, right? So how typically do you find someone who is like you? Well, you would answer probably some kind of survey, right? Your interests, your whatever, right? And then the program would search a database to find people with similar interests, right? Well, they take a different approach. So what they do is, before you get to use their service, they make you watch a bunch of videos. And through a webcam, through heart rate monitoring and other means, they measure your response to the videos. They convert those responses into features. And then they compare your features with other people's features. So the idea is, if your features are similar, you're having a similar response to the same video, and maybe you're alike. So basically, they're trying to use biometrics to match people's feelings about the same thing. So the idea is, if you and I feel the same way about something, then we may be a good match. Anybody here passionate about biometrics? No? Right? I'm not going to ask the question. So, and I have a short video for that as well. I hope it won't make us watch an advertisement. So those are the guys who are trying to market this.
Hi, my name is Dal Ellington, founder of Biometric Match. With me here is Zeb. He's in charge of most of the science behind the scenes, some of which he's working on right now. With our system, users watch short video stimuli clips. Your reaction to the stimuli videos, your facial cue, heart rate, and breathing rate data are rendered into data points which allow us to extract patterns and create these biometric maps. First, I want to tell you why we created them and a little bit about Biometric Match. We would love to say that online dating is fabulous and the science behind it is amazing, except it's not fabulous and there's almost no science. Right, Zeb?
That's right.
It doesn't matter how many times you swipe or how many questions you answer. Neither of the current systems, nor their multiple variations, can give you insight into perception, emotion, or the part of your personality that cannot be written on a form or seen in a swipe. Our system allows a user to enable their webcam and make a video recording as they watch prepared stimuli videos. Basically, you log on to biometricmatch.com, watch videos, and your microfacial cue, heart rate, and breathing rate biometric responses to the stimuli videos is rendered and expressed in data points. What a user looks at, in which order, for how long, changes in baseline heart rate and breathing rate, and microfacial cue feedback gives valuable insight into a person's likes, dislikes, sense of humor, lack thereof, as well as interests and aspects of general personality. Far more insight than endless forums and finger swipes. With our analytics methods, all of this data can be captured through webcam interface, so all you need is a device with a camera. Did I think a joke was funny or offensive? That's the type of data that's represented in the maps.
So like after that, they just start asking you to give money to their Kickstarter campaign. So, all right. So maybe this is the future of online dating through your biometrics. All right. So another one is the applications of biometrics in gaming and entertainment. That's right. Biometrics is not confined to the area of security anymore. So, there are gaming technologies right now that are using biofeedback from your body in order to control the game. So for example, if they sense a heart rate increase, perhaps you're being scared. Maybe the game is doing something right to scare you, if that's the point of the game. All right? So here are some examples out there. So in '97, there was a game called F-Quake where the player's avatar, the little pixelated character you control on the screen, that was '97, it would jump every time when the person, would get scared. Okay? They have a way of measuring that. Another one is Balloon Trip, also one of those pixelated games. It uses a galvanic skin response, which is another biometric, in order to control the game. So if the biometric system detects that you're feeling excited, it starts creating more enemies for you to fight. A much more recent advance was in 2014. Anybody here played Half-Life 2 and loved it? Yeah, it was an awesome game, right? I played it, all right? Yeah, so, well, somebody wrote a mod for Half-Life 2. And basically, the idea was this. So they used, once again, the skin galvanic response to measure your biometric. So if they detect, for example, that you're stressed or you're excited, it would vary how your avatar behaves. So in other words, how fast you can run, how quickly can you grab weapons, the strength of the opponents, which were zombies, and also the environment itself. So how often would you get a health pack, and how many enemies would come in your way. It will also control the ambience as well. So for example, the more scared you are, the more foggy the environment can become. Okay? And if you play the Silent Hill game series, it's pretty amazing what can be done by just controlling the fog. If you're too young to remember that, look it up on YouTube. All right? So, okay, so I think I skipped something. Let's see. Yes, there we go. So yet another very interesting application of biometrics in the leisure and entertainment industry is the NeuroWare company. Anybody heard of them? They make two very interesting novelty products, can I say? So one is called Neko Mini. Neko Mini is basically a set of wearable cat ears which monitor your brainwave activity. Based on the brainwave activity, they try to establish your mood. And based on your mood, the cat ears, they move to express your feelings in more cat-like manner, I suppose. They also have something called Shipu, which is a tail. So, and I have videos for that. Because I figured if I don't show you, you will not believe me. Yeah. And you move the ears with your mind. So basically, this thing measures your brain activity. once again, you come down, your ears go down. So this is the cat ears, and this is the tail. Yeah.
This is the strangest thing ever. Kitty cat ears that show your...
Right? So yeah, so basically, once again, the tail, well, not the tail, but the thing which you wear on your head, it measures your brain activity, and based on that, the tail, well, wags.
to be host of many other shows on Twit.
Me too.
What you are wearing, the Neko Mimi.
The Neko Mimi,
So basically, that's the idea. I think you get the idea.
English as cat ear.
Oh, wait.
Neko
Okay.
means cat,
Nothing
and
obscure.
Mimi means ear.
Here,
Now,
here.
they're rotating right now in your head.
There we go. Okay. This one gets me every time. All right. So I would like to conclude this talk by talking about the challenges to biometrics. Now, I hope that by seeing some of those novel applications, you're probably maybe blown away by the main different uses of biometrics. But biometrics is not an easy research field, and I know because, well, I work in it now. So what are some of the challenges in biometrics to come? Well, now, I could talk about this for another day or two, but instead I decided to just throw up some of the popular biometrics and talk about the kinds of challenges which we face. Let's take face recognition, no pun intended. So one of the challenges of face recognition, say in surveillance systems in airport security, is that people are just, what are they doing? They're just walking, right? They're not trying to cooperate with the camera taking their picture, especially if you're a criminal, right? Yeah, you would probably want to avoid your face being recognized. So in the outdoor environments, as a result of the face's angle, the lighting, and so many other factors, makeup, people wearing, hats on their faces, facial hair or like they're off, all of that makes face recognition much more difficult. Another interesting problem is that women are more difficult to recognize than men. Okay? Anybody here feeling encouraged by that? Right? So, okay, so of course, another big thing is that facial recognition systems, no matter what kind of system you are, whether you're a surveillance system or you're just a system on the mobile phone, you should be able to recognize people of all sorts of demographics. So that's another big challenge because people of different demographics have different features somewhat. So making facial recognition systems robust to all demographics is the key challenge, especially with the international nature of terrorism right now, right? You've got to be able to recognize a terrorist no matter what sort of demographic he belongs to. Another one is fingerprint recognition. So this one is kind of interesting. So one of the biggest problems in fingerprint recognition, and once again, and this goes for all biometrics out there, is liveness testing. So how do I know that the fingerprint image that I got was actually from a real finger? How do I know it wasn't from a synthetic finger or from, and that's disturbing, if I killed the user and I cut off his finger? So liveness testing is a very important topic. So when iPhone 5S came out, which we all loved, Apple was saying how secure the fingerprint reader was. Well, 2 days after iPhone 5S was released, a German hacker group called Chaos Computer Club, they have produced a YouTube video, and it's still there, which shows you a step-by-step process how to take a person's fingerprint and make a fake finger and use that finger to bypass Apple's fingerprint scanner. So now, this is bad enough if you're dealing with a personal phone, but of course it's even worse if you're dealing with, for example, a building security system, okay? Or if you're dealing with a program such as US Visit, right? Now, hopefully the officer will check, is that a real finger, right? Fingerprint readers have a long history of, failing at liveness testing. Anybody heard of a gummy bear attack? The idea is simple. Anybody ever had a gummy bear candy? What do you know about them? They're sticky, right? So the idea is this. As I'm walking around and I'm touching things, I'm leaving my fingerprints everywhere, right? So the idea is you take a gummy bear, you put it against the fingerprint, and then you take the gummy bear and you put it against the fingerprint reader. There you have it. Now, in the age of fingerprint reading, this is your password, right? And everywhere you go, you touch things, right? Which in our password terminology would be you writing your password everywhere you go. Not a smart idea, right? Okay? Right? Another challenge is poor quality images. I'm sure we all had that. So you're in Applebee's and you're eating that, luscious chicken, and then you got to get a call. What do you have to do? Unlike your phone with your fingerprint, right? But your fingerprint is covered with sauce, right? So, and the fingerprint scanner, you just cannot pick it up. So that's another challenge. Dealing with poor quality images resulting from your fingerprint being, well, either obstructed or just plain dirty. Right? And there are many other challenges as well. What about iris and retina? So those right now, especially in the mobile world, they're in their very beginning stages. One of the issues with those biometrics, although very good identifiers, they require a great deal of cooperation from the person who is getting scanned. So you got to look at it a certain way. It's kind of difficult, and some people find it cumbersome. It also can be time-consuming. You may have to do multiple tries before you get it to work. Also, some people have conditions such as iris occlusion, where your iris is simply not visible. So, yeah. So, any eye doctors here who can explain that? Okay, no? Yeah, all right. So, in conclusion, the biometrics are becoming more and more widespread. More different biometric modalities are emerging every day. So we talked about brainwave. Another one is body salinity. How salty is the water in your body? We're mostly water. We talked about ear. Another one is the vein patterns in your body. Humans have different vein patterns. How you smell. Facial thermogram, the heartbeat. Another very interesting application that I read about, the person's butt geometry. In Japan, some scientists, they done research on that, and they realized that humans have unique butt geometry. And one of the applications for which they thought of using that is the security of vehicles. When you sit down to drive your car, it'll check you and make sure that you're legit, right? That's a real thing. There will be new applications of biometrics as well, including education, and we're doing some research in that as well. So recently there has been a company called ProctorTrack, and they produced a technology for proctoring online students who are taking exams. So the idea is, as you're taking an exam, a webcam monitors you and it analyzes your facial movement to make sure you don't glance suspiciously, to make sure you don't leave the exam. And of course it verifies that you are actually the person who is supposed to be taking the exam. So we're doing some research in that area as well. ATMs will likely be using fingerprint readers pretty soon. Government programs such as the Aadhaar program in India, which has enrolled more than 60 million Indian citizens into the retinal scanning program, they likely become more and more common. And there is much more than I can even summarize here. So, and that concludes my talk. And thank you so much for coming and listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. And before I open up the floor to questions, I'd just like to say that this talk, once again, is sponsored by the ECS Center for Cybersecurity. And if you enjoy this talk and you'd like to see more of the kind, please check out our website. And if you're feeling generous, please click the Donate Now button. Thank you so much. OK, questions now. Yeah. Yeah.